Fantastic Four First Steps gets absolutely wrecked in its second weekend. This does not look good for Marvel going forward. It does not look good for Fantastic Four in terms of profitability. So let's take a quick look at this as we're already only in, I shouldn't say already, we are only in the second weekend. But as we can see here, dropping a massive 66%. That is estimates, and it could be actually worse. We have the Friday numbers, which are worse. The film opened 117 million domestically, basically about the same as Superman, but it has not had the legs that Superman has had. Or I shouldn't say it doesn't look like it's going to have the legs, at least initially. Fantastic Four bombing box office facing massive 66% decline. We'll take a look at the numbers in the second because we do have the Friday numbers. That is more than the estimate. Open to 117.6 million. Weekend two estimates between 40 and 45 million, but it may not hit that, as we will see for the Friday number, which, okay, we've got right here 11.7 million. That is an 80% drop from its debut last Friday. James Gunn Superman only dropped 53.2%. Its second weekend, it is doing much better than it turns out that Fantastic Four will do. At least that's how it is looking right now. And we'll take a look at some recent Marvel movies because this context is important when we're looking at these numbers, just like we're seeing all the nonsense about how Superman is, you know, the highest grossing domestic Superman ever. And of course, even Man of Steel, which wasn't all that long ago, when you factor in inflation, destroys the current Superman. But that's a topic for another day. Another day. Thunderbolts actually only had a 56% drop. The problem is not a lot of people went. Captain America Brave New World dropped 68%, but not a lot of people went. Whereas when Marvel was in its heyday, we go back pre-Endgame, a lot of movies, a number of movies would have drops of 50, 60, 70% from weekend one to weekend two. The difference was back then, weekend one was such a huge, huge, huge number that you expected that drop because so many people wanted to see it that first weekend. Now you have blah numbers the very first weekend, and then it is having a huge drop off. If we look here, we can see Fantastic Four First Steps, 11.7 million on Friday. That is an 80% drop from the previous week. 170 million total gross. So if we take a look at it over here, it is now at a worldwide box office of 268, just under 269 million. Now it is in the expected, but as you can see, it's trending at the much lower end of that. This does not bode well going forward. It doesn't look like it's going to hit 300 million by the end of this weekend, or even close to it really worldwide. It's obviously not doing well internationally. Internationally is not even close to the domestic box office number. And if we go down and we just look at the days, there it is. The first, second Friday that we've had, the second Friday, down 80% from the 24.5 million that it did on the very first Friday. This is a disaster for Marvel. And this, we're not even getting into the fact that recently the budgets, it turns out, looks like they're going to be, as we've seen with Marvel and Disney from, it's not far from the first time that the budget is actually much, much higher than we were told. Not only is Fantastic Four not going to do well overall, it does not look like it even has a chance of making back what was put into this movie, at least not theatrically. Of course, it's going to be something that'll be put on Disney Plus and so forth. So it's still, it's still a piece of content for Disney, although they might want to shift away from the idea of just creating content and going back to making something good. Now, if we look at Superman, of course, it debuted 2 weeks earlier. It is up over $500 million. Again, not great internationally compared to the domestic, and it is more solidly in its expected range, although it is a little lower. But, and I know a lot of people are screaming about this. For some reason, a lot of people are very, very upset when you talk about the reality of what Superman needs to do in order to break even, which conservatively is around 700 million or so. And it does not look like it's going to hit that number. And then again, it had recently come out that the budget was much, much higher than the reported 325, more like 300 million. And if that's the case, you're talking about, again, conservatively, a $750 million break even point. But Superman seems to probably have spent a lot more on marketing than a typical movie as well, so it could be even higher, but it does not look like Superman is going to break even at the box office. Now, that being said, I think it's done well enough that, of course, the James Gunn's um, DC universe is going to continue. And then finally, the other big franchise in July that was released has already broken 700 million worldwide. And as you can see, unlike Superman and Fantastic Four, Jurassic World Rebirth made more internationally than domestically. Now, this is a drop from Jurassic World the first one did like 1.6 billion. Then Fallen Kingdom did about 1.3, and then Dominion did about a billion, just over $1 billion. So it's about a 300 million drop to each one. Jurassic World looks like it's going to hold with that. However, from all reports, Jurassic World Rebirth did this with a budget under $200 million. So it's going to be solidly profitable, and that is really that's all they're looking for. When you're talking about $180 million budget, I believe it was, for Jurassic World, and they've already grossed 736 million worldwide. Probably not going to get much higher than that, but that is clearly a win. That is clearly a win. I mean, I don't know that it bodes well going forward for the franchise, as this is the fourth one, and they might need to let it breathe a little bit the way they did from Jurassic Park 3 to Jurassic World, which kind of re-kickstarted the entire franchise. But I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts on the Fantastic Four budget, not budget, but box office. Well, I guess budget plays a role compared to Superman. What you think this means going forward? We've got a lot of time now. Now we do have Spider-Man, which was supposed to be after uh, Doomsday, but is now going to be before. But basically, the next big Marvel movie is, not till what? Christmas or December, November of 2026. So we've got a long time between. That could be very, very good for Marvel, but we shall see. The issues I think you had with Marvel is, again, they still haven't shifted gears, so to speak. It underperforming is not a surprise because the people who want to see these movies have not been the target audience for quite a while. Not now. Feige's Endgame approach, post Endgame approach, has been a absolute disaster for Marvel. It has turned off all the fans that actually paid money to go see the MCU. It's just they just simply aren't turning up. Women who they tried to target, this isn't their. Now, of course, there are women who are comic book fans and read comic books and all of that, but they're not the majority. They should not be the target audience, but that's what Feige did. And of course, they're not going because the majority of the audience is still about 70% of the fanboys. And most of them said, nah, you know what? We're going to pass. You've disrespected us and the things we love too often now. So they're not showing up. I mean, I do think a lot more of them did go to see Superman. And look, Fantastic Four, ultimately, I think it's just kind of a boring movie. Not a lot happened. The characters are all kind of They're not really offensive, but you don't really care about them either. I think the female Silver Surfer thing was a problem. Sue Storm was, yeah, she was a bit of a girl boss, not in the way we've seen with some other movies, and I don't think she was, in terms of, disparaging the male characters or any of that. But if you've seen it already, you understand, like with the speech and with the ending, it was more centered on Sue Storm for sure. And women simply aren't watching it, and the audience that it should be for is tired of the nonsense and being attacked and so forth. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for checking this out. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you later.